You stood in that garden center aisle back in April. The cart was full of color. $60, maybe 80 by the time you reached the register. You came home, you dug the holes, you watered everything in, and you felt good about it. And then July came around, and half of what you planted was brown sticks and bare dirt. You stood there looking at it with your coffee going cold in your hand, and you felt that little knot of guilt. Money in the ground. Again. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a quiet voice said, maybe you're just not a garden person. I want to talk about that voice because it's lying to you. You're not lazy. You've got knees that don't bend like they used to. You've got a back that votes no. You've got a life. The problem was never you. The problem was the plants. Nobody taught you which ones to buy, and there's a reason nobody taught you. We'll get to that before we're done today. My name is Walter Hayes. I'm 68 years old, and I farm the same Ozark ground in Missouri that my grandfather worked back in the 1940s. 50-some years I've had my hands in this dirt. I've killed plenty of plants in that time, but I've also learned which ones simply refuse to die. That's what today is about. I'm going to give you 7 perennials. Every one of them costs less than about $12 at the nursery. Every one of them gets planted once and comes back on its own, year after year. And here's the part most lists skip right over. Every single one of these 7 is a plant the deer and the rabbits walk past. That was my first rule putting this list together, and I'll tell you why as we go. Number 6 is the one I want you to wait for. It blooms from late spring clear to frost, and I'd bet good money you've never planted it. Don't you leave before we get there. Let's get into it. Number 1, catmint. If I could only hand a struggling gardener one plant, more often than not, this would be the one. Catmint grows in a soft, rounded mound about 2 feet tall and 3 feet wide, and from late May on, the whole thing disappears under a haze of small lavender-blue flowers. A row of it along a walkway looks like low purple fog sitting on the ground. It blooms in spring, and then it blooms again in late summer, and bees work it from the first flower to the last. Here's why it earns its place. The leaves are full of aromatic oils. Crush one, and you'll smell it on your fingers for an hour. Deer hate that smell. Rabbits hate it too. They take one sniff and move along to your neighbor's hostas. That scent is the whole defense system, and you don't pay a dime for it. Here's where most folks go wrong with this one. They treat it too kindly. Rich soil, fertilizer, plenty of water, and the plant flops open in the middle like a bad haircut. Catmint wants lean soil, full sun, and to be mostly ignored. The one job you have is this. When that first big flush of bloom fades, usually late June, take your shears and cut the whole plant back by about 1/3. 3 to 4 weeks later, it comes back fuller and blooms into fall, planted in zones 3 through 8. Full sun. Space the plants about 2 feet apart. Water the first summer while it settles in, and after that the rain handles it. Fair warning, the neighborhood cats may come roll in it. Margaret thinks that's the best part. Number 2, Purple Coneflower. You've seen this one. Tall, sturdy stems about 3 feet high, each one carrying a big daisy-shaped flower with pink-purple petals around a copper-orange cone. It blooms from early summer into fall. It shrugs off heat, it shrugs off drought, and it grows in soil that would discourage most anything else. The reason it's so tough is simple. It's a native prairie plant. It evolved on this continent through droughts and blizzards and everything in between, long before anybody owned a hose. You're not keeping it alive. You're just getting out of its way. The mistake people make is in the fall. They tidy up. They cut every stem to the ground because that's what looks neat. Don't. Leave those seed heads standing all winter. The goldfinches will sit on them and eat through the cold months. And there are few prettier things on a gray January morning than a yellow bird on a dried coneflower with snow on the ground. You cut it all back in early spring instead, and you've lost nothing. One more thing, and this answers a question I hear all the time. How do you get more plants without buying them? Coneflower is your teacher. After 3 or 4 years, a clump gets big enough to divide. You slice down through it with a spade in early spring, lift half, and plant that half somewhere else. One $6 plant becomes 2, then 4, then 8. The old people traded divisions over the fence. That's how whole neighborhoods got planted, and it didn't cost anybody anything. Zones 3 through 9. Full sun to a little afternoon shade. Space them about 18 inches apart. Now, before we get to number 3, let me ask you something honest. How much have you spent over the years on plants that died by August? Add it up in your head. For most folks, it's hundreds of dollars. Everything on this channel is aimed at ending that. The old methods, the plants that last, the stuff that used to get passed down for free. Subscribing costs you nothing, and it may be the smartest thing you do in the garden today. All right, back to the list. Number 3, Sedum. The variety to ask for is Autumn Joy. And I'll say this plainly, in 50 years, I have never once seen this plant die of neglect. Not once. It grows in a tidy, upright clump about 2 feet tall with thick, fleshy blue-green leaves. In late summer, it puts up broad, flat flower heads that open pale pink, deepen to rose, and then age to a warm rust bronze that stands right through the snow. The secret is in those fat leaves. Sedum is a succulent. It stores its own water the way a cactus does. Forget to water it for a month in July, and it genuinely does not notice. Rocky soil, sandy soil, that blazing strip along the driveway where everything else cooks. That's where sedum is happiest. Which brings me to the only way people manage to kill it. They love it to death. They water it on a schedule. The soil stays damp, and the roots rot from below. If you take one rule away from this whole list, take this one. These 7 plants die of care, not of abandonment. When in doubt, do nothing. The plant will tell you if it needs you, and it almost never will. Zones 3 through 9. Full sun. Space them about 18 inches to 2 feet apart. Cut the old stems down in early spring, and that's the entire year's work. Now, I'll be straight with you, because that's the only way I know how to talk. You may have noticed 2 famous plants missing from this list: hostas and daylilies. Every easy plant list on the internet leads with them. I left them off on purpose. Deer eat hostas like salad. Slugs finish whatever the deer miss. And there's a harder truth. Daylilies are seriously toxic to cats, every part of them. And hostas can sicken a dog that chews them. If you've got grandkids' pets or your own roaming the yard, you deserve to know that before you plant, not after. So they're out, and you won't miss them. Number 4, Perennial Salvia. Ask for a variety called May Night. It grows about 1.5 feet tall, and it covers itself in upright spikes of deep violet blue. That color is the richest thing in the late spring garden, and it solves a problem every yard has. That dead stretch in July, when the spring flowers are finished and nothing else has started. Like catmint, salvia carries strong oils in its leaves, and the deer and rabbits want nothing to do with it. The bees and hummingbirds feel exactly the opposite. Plant 3 of them, and you'll have wings over your garden all summer. The trick with salvia is one small habit. When a flower spike turns brown and dry, follow it down the stem to the next pair of leaves and snip it off there. Within a couple of weeks, new spikes rise to replace it. Skip that little job, and the plant decides its season is over and quits early. Do it, and you get bloom from May into September. It's a 1-minute task you do while your coffee cools. The thing that kills salvia is the same thing that kills sedum: wet feet. It wants sun and drainage and a dry spell now and then. If you've got a spot where water stands after rain, put salvia somewhere else. Zones 4 through 9. Full sun. Space them about 18 inches apart. If you're up in Zone 4, tuck some mulch around the base in late fall, and it'll come through the worst winters just fine. We're past the halfway mark now, and number 6 is still ahead. The one that blooms from late spring to the first frost, longer than anything else on this list, and that almost nobody plants. Stay with me, because right after it comes the plant I want you to picture from your porch at sundown. Number 5, Creeping Phlox. This is the one that handles the spot you've given up on: the bare slope, the bank too steep to mow, the dirt above the retaining wall. Creeping Phlox stays low, about 6 inches tall, and spreads into a mat 2 feet wide or more. And every spring, for 3 or 4 weeks, that mat disappears completely under flowers: hot pink, lavender, white, magenta. From the street, it looks like somebody spilled paint down the hillside. People will slow their cars. After the bloom, it settles into a dense, needle-leafed evergreen carpet, and that carpet is doing quiet work all season long. It grows so thick that sunlight never reaches the soil underneath it. No light means no weed seeds sprouting. That's the whole secret. The plant does your weeding for you every day forever. It holds the soil on the slope too, so the rain stops carving little gullies. The mistake folks make is planting it in shade. In shade, it thins out, blooms poorly, and lets the weeds back in. This plant wants sun, at least 6 hours of it, and soil that drains. Give it that, and your only task is one light trim with the shears after it finishes blooming to keep it tight. Zones 3 through 9. Full sun. Space new plants about 1.5 feet apart and let them knit together. My grandfather had it pouring over a limestone wall by the barn, and 60 years later, the daughter plants of that patch are still blooming on 3 farms in our county. That's what a one-time purchase looks like. Before the big one, do me a favor. Put your state, or your USDA zone if you know it, in the comments below. I read everyone, and what you tell me decides what we cover next on this channel. A grower in Michigan and a grower in Georgia need different answers, and the comments are how I know who's out there. Number 6. Here it is, the one I told you about, Hardy Geranium. The variety is called Rozanne. Now hold on, because I know what just happened in your head. You pictured that red flower in a plastic window box that gets thrown out every October. That is not this plant. That one borrowed the name. The true hardy geranium, the old-timers called it cranesbill, is a tough, spreading perennial that comes back for decades, and Rozanne is the queen of them. She forms a soft mound about 18 inches tall and 2 feet wide, covered in violet blue flowers the size of a $50. each with a small white eye. And here is the number that should get your attention. She starts blooming in late spring and does not stop until frost cuts her down. 5 months of bloom, sometimes more. Nothing else on this list comes close. The flowers are sterile, so she never sets seed, and a plant that can't make seed pours everything into making more flowers instead. That's the mechanism, and it's why she outblooms everything around her. She takes full sun up north and appreciates afternoon shade in hot country. Deer leave her alone. She weaves politely between other plants without smothering them. If she gets a bit sprawly in midsummer, shear the whole mound back by half. She looks rough for 2 weeks, then comes back fresh and blooms to the end. Zones 4 through 8. Space her about 2 feet apart. The only reason you've never planted her is that nobody handed you the name. Now you have it. Write it down. Rozanne, number 7, Russian sage. I saved this one for last because of how it looks in the evening. Picture a cloud of silver-white stems, 3 to 4 feet tall, covered in thousands of tiny lavender-blue flowers, swaying a little in the breeze with the sun going down behind it. From midsummer to fall, it doesn't look planted, it looks like weather. It makes everything near it more beautiful, and people will ask you what it is. And it thrives on being ignored. Lean soil, blazing sun, drought, wind. The harder the spot, the better it performs. Feed it and pamper it, and it flops. Leave it alone, and it stands like a soldier. 2 honest things, because this plant has 2 rules. First, never cut it back in fall. Those old silver stems protect the crown from freezing all winter. Folks who tidy it down in November are the folks who wonder why it didn't return. You wait until spring, then cut the whole thing to about 6 inches, and it rebuilds from there. Second, in the dry country out west, this plant can wander. Gardeners in the high desert tell me it sends up shoots where it wasn't invited. Out there, give it room of its own or keep a spade handy in spring. Here in the Midwest and back east, it stays mannerly. Zones 4 through 9, full sun. Space them about 3 feet apart because they will fill it. That's the 7. Now let me hand them back to you a different way by the problem you're actually staring at. For that hot, dry, miserable strip nothing survives, sedum and Russian sage will treat it like home. For the slope you can't mow, creeping phlox, and your weeding there is done for good. For knees and backs that have had enough, catmint, sedum, and Rozanne ask for 1 cut a year and nothing else. For the deer that look in your sliding door like they pay rent, all 7. That was the price of admission to this list. And for the longest possible show of color, Rozanne and Salvia, late spring to frost. Pick 3. Just 3. That's a whole garden's worth of change for under $40. Now, the question I promised to answer. Why did nobody teach you this? Nobody had to hide it. The incentives did the quiet work. A customer who plants once and succeeds doesn't come back in May. The garden centers earn their living on the annuals you replace every spring and the trays of color that die by August. There's simply no money in teaching folks the plants that last 20 years. The old people knew this because they had to. Their plants came over the fence from a neighbor, not off a truck. The knowledge didn't disappear. It just stopped being profitable to repeat. So here's your task this week, before Sunday. Take your morning coffee and walk your yard slowly, 1 time around. Find the one spot that has beaten you year after year. The slope, the hot strip, the corner. Just find it and stand there a minute. Then ask one neighbor with a good garden if they're dividing anything this season. You'd be surprised how often the answer is yes and free. And one more thing before you go. Did your mother or your grandmother have a pass-along plant? One that traveled from yard to yard in the family? Tell me about it in the comments. Those plants and those stories are exactly the kind of thing that gets lost when nobody writes them down. I read every single one. Next time, we're doing the other side of this coin. The 5 popular plants I would never put in the ground again and what to plant in their place. After today, you can probably guess 1 or 2 of them. That's the old garden way. I'll see you in the garden.